Hello, everybody. Thank you for being present. I want to thank everybody here for being present. We're going to start. Thank you, Sandra Santana. Thank you, Lee Quinones, Jose Pepe Flores, and Luis Guzman, and myself, Al Diaz. And at this point, I think I'm going to hand it off to Louis, who's going to start this conversation. But I want to thank you individuals as well for taking time out in your busy schedules to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. Okay, I like to stand up. Is that okay? Feedback, okay. Come back here. So, my name is Luis Guzman, and I was born in Calle, Puerto Rico, raised in New York City. My family moved to the Lower East Side in 1969. We moved to Masrick Towers over there on the Lansing and Columbia Street. And at that time, that was middle-class housing. I think it still is. But I ventured out from there. I ventured out to Avenue C, Avenue B. It was ghetto, you know. It was the war zone. That's what I knew. And that's where my biggest influence came from. People like Bimbo Rivas, Jorge Brando, the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, people like Carmen Lopez, Martita Morales, Carmen Hernandez, so many. Tato Laviera. Yeah, I can't remember all the names because I'm 400 years old, so dame un break. But anyway, in all honesty, I mean, just being surrounded by all these community activists, all these artists. I mean, we're talking about musicians, we're talking about poets, we're talking about writers, we're talking about bomba plenero dancers, congueros, you name it. Those were my influences, and at the time, we needed it. We needed it because, you know, we were always looking for the soul of our neighborhood, of our community, and for me, that's how it came to me. And like I said, just hanging out with all these guys and all the poetry readings that we went through, you know, all the bembes, all the block parties, that was like a real neighborhood thing, which unfortunately here in 2021, it's been very much minimized by this gentrification and overdevelopment of our community. So, but anyway, it was important to me because, again, it gave me a foundation. It gave me a foundation and it gave me a sense of belonging. Like, you know, these are my people, you know, we belong together, we grow together, we stimulate each other. And it was along those lines that I met people like Lee, you know. Lee, so you guys know, is like one of my biggest influences as far as the arts go, because I was working at Henry Street Settlement, and in junior high school 56, the handball court, he painted one of the most incredible murals I ever seen in my life, you know. So, but anyway, that's who I am and where I am. But I'd like to ask you guys, first of all, if you introduce yourself, where you from in the neighborhood, and what were some of your influences? Sandra. And by the way, this is her first time doing it, so let's give her a little support and love. And I already told her, she told me if she starts to cry, we all gonna cry with her. This is community. Dale, mija.
Hi everyone, my name is Sandra Santana. I've lived in the Lower East Side my whole life. I live in Baruch. I was raised with my grandmother, and I raised my two daughters also in the same apartment. We moved into Baruch in 1973. Before then, my parents, my grandma lived on 5th Street and C. but I don't remember that. I just know we lived there. The only home I've ever known is where I live now. Um, I'm gonna, I can't really, I don't know who I was influenced by, I'm sorry. But I do remember that in the 8th grade, my music teacher just saw something in me, and I feel like it has always been suppressed, and I feel like the universe is telling me that the time is right now, so that's why I'm here.
My name is Lee Quinones, and I'm a recovering graffiti artist. I always say that, but yeah, I was born in Puerto Rico, in Ponce, and I was brought here at 8 months old to the lower east side, which is right by the Brooklyn Bridge, the last standing projects. And all my life I've been drawing and painting since I was 5 years old. And in a quick sense, I ground my teeth on the New York City subway system in the early 70s in the graffiti movement explosion that happened, and now worldwide. But I hung out a lot, I loitered a lot in the Avenue as we knew it. And it was really exciting there and very dangerous, but it was what I would say the extension of the lower, because it was, we lived in the shadows of the Lower East Side, but we felt that we were all together. And a lot of my influences, believe it or not, were music scores from films. I loved Isaac Hayes and Lalo Schifrin and John Williams and all those cats. They just made me feel alive, and they made me feel like whatever I was doing, whether it was poetry or painting, I felt very powerful with the music as my backwind. So there, in short, without boring you, that's, and still continuing to paint to this day. Just excited to be here with all our friends and within this beautiful show of Al Diaz and with legends of yore. So.
Jose Generoso Flores Anaya is my name, given at birth, but here you have to drop the middle name, and then you're known as Pepe Flores. This year, 2021, is my 50th anniversary of moving to New York City. It's been that long that I moved into this neighborhood. And I'm really lucky that I moved into the Lower East Side, or Loisaida, because I came to being like if I was in un pueblo de Puerto Rico. And I got my tissue because we're gonna cry today a lot, I'm not afraid of crying because of this memory. Just seeing this guy, which I met when he was 15 years old, and Aspira on 14th Street, and he didn't remember, I remember that. But it's great because he saw that we met at the Poets Cafe. No, I know him before that. I met him before that. So I moved into this neighborhood, which happened to be a blessing in disguise to me, because like I'm telling you, I mean, back in the old days, you walk out of your house, and before you get to the corner, you say hello to at least 10 people, if not more. Today, it takes me 10 blocks to say hello to a person that I see, not counting Adela, because, that's family. So, yeah, that doesn't count. But, yeah, I saw the best and the worst of this neighborhood. I saw the creative side of it. I saw the beautiful people of it. I saw the drug cart scene that really fucked us up very bad. We lost a lot of people, young and old. And actually, it was crack the one that really put the nail in the coffin to this neighborhood. That's when developers, overdeveloping really took off. So it's an honor to be here. I'm glad that Al invited me for this. Somebody called me yesterday, to a special rumba out in the neighborhood, and I was like, Pepe, come, man, Pepe. No. I gave my word to be there tomorrow, and that's what I'm here. I have to be here. We have to be here to let the world know and the people know that the Loisaida community, was a very significant, vibrant community, very creative, and that's it.
That's great, listening to you guys. Guys, I mean, I could relate to everything that everyone here has said. My name's Al Diaz. I'm a certified product of the Lower East Side. I was born and raised here. I lived here till well into my 30s. I haven't had a Lower East Side address for about 15 years. I've been relocated to Brooklyn, but I still have a lot of dealings here. I think I was influenced. First of all, I became aware of my need to create at a very young age, and I was blessed with, even though I went to the local Catholic school, that was the closest thing to any kind of private school that one might experience here. I had I was blessed by having an art teacher like Henry Fiol, who's, you know, a vital contributor to Latin music and to painting, and he inspired me, and people like, you know, that there would be like drawing and painting classes held in, I don't know, in East Harlem, and my parents were kind enough to, I remember my father used to drive me up to 125th Street to the same building where WWRL was. Remember WWRL? And Dick Gregory, and they had drawing classes for kids there, or painting classes, and I did that, and before University of the Streets was University of the Streets, there was a furniture store, and they had drawing classes on the second floor there. So as a kid, even though I came from the projects as well, I was blessed to have, to be able to explore my creative side or whatever, and that set me up for a life of wanting to be and pursuing a career as an artist.
So I like to ask you guys, so like, what was the first thing, your first piece, that you did that not only influenced you, but influenced other people here in the neighborhood that you can remember?
Wow. Well, as far as, you had mentioned earlier the handball court mural that I had painted in the schoolyard of junior high school 56, which was the junior high school that I never finished. And because I was just painting every night, and I did a big mega mural, the first of its kind, called Howard the Duck, based on the Howard the Duck character from the DC comics. It was the first of its kind, and it was a time of arrival for me as an artist, because I knew that I was doing something very unprecedented. And behind me, again, mentioning the music that was behind me, was the influence of DJs in the neighborhood. Like DJs Apache from the Balladics, and Ice and Spanky from the Smith Projects. So that music was always in my veins, and so was the paint and the fumes. I'm surprised I'm not glowing in the dark yet, but yeah, that mural pretty much changed the pace and the taste of graffiti as we knew it. And it was, to me, it was just another challenge, a personal challenge. But at the same time, I knew I was creating something that was going to push the envelope further and just flip the script. So I already had exhausted everything I could do on the subways, 120 plus whole cars, entire whole cars, and I just felt I needed to do something that would be different and not running away from you. So that's what I can remember of that.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, music is one of my passions. I'm a dancer, but I think I came out dancing. I didn't come out walking. I came out dancing out of my mother's belly. And unfortunately, I was raised in a very, very poor conditions in Puerto Rico, in the countryside. And when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I used to put the radio station of the government, WWPR was a radio station, and they used to play classical music. And I used to take 2 sticks and go like this, and they say, he's crazy, I was telling them I want to take violin classes, but they couldn't afford, they didn't know, had no idea, and they couldn't afford it. So ended up being a dancer. And basically salsa music, that's what I dance, but also bomba y plena. So out of those interests, I met this woman that was part of an organization. Her name is Roberta Flack. Roberta Singer. Roberta Flack is a singer. Roberta Singer, and she was able to get some monies from NIA and other people. So we developed a program in Tompkins Square Park. These are the days of the band shell. It was called Dos Alas, Two Wings. And we used to have music from Puerto Rico and music from Cuba, because there's a famous poem by Martí: Cuba y Puerto Rico son de un pájaro las dos alas, reciben balas y tiros en el mismo corazón. So we had a good run for about 4 or 5 years. We had a lot of people coming in there. People were very excited in the summertime having music in there. And that was a tradition, because Tompkins Square Park always was a magnet for music. I mean, you talk back in the 60s, the rock and roll, then the punk scene that was here. And then we had to put out, that's what I sold it to Roberta. So that we're here, we have a traditional music, and we wasn't presenting salsa music per se. We were playing Jíbaro music and bomba y plena music. Fuck salsa for a minute. That's in the air, you know what I mean? Everybody can hear that. This music doesn't have the exposure that needs to be, here. So it happened. And then the other things that I did with music was related to my other interest, which is education. I was a daycare teacher for 30 years in a daycare on First Avenue on 9th Street called Children's Liberation. So can you imagine the name? When we put the name to the daycare, people say, what is that? Children's Liberation? Yeah, that's what it is. Children's Liberation. These kids were coming down the street with guns and rifles and having a revolution. No. It goes more than that. So what we did, or what happened, is that we used to have these cake sales. And cake sales, what you make, $50, $80 in a day. So I told one of the mothers, listen, let's have a dance. Yeah? What kind of dance? Oh, salsa dance. So we got Campos Plaza, and we hired Conjunto Libre, one of the hottest bands in New York City. In one night, we raised $5,000. That's some money for the daycare. And that money, we used to take the children to the Nutcracker at Lincoln Center at night. Okay? No parents, only the teachers and the children. And those children, 4 and 5-year-olds, they were so cool watching the Nutcracker that people would say, how old are those kids? Because there were all these teenagers being very obnoxious, and my children were like, and they knew, and the trick was that during arrest time, we used to play the music of the Nutcracker. So we were like feeding them, when they were sleeping, that's what they were listening. So they already knew the music. And I read them the story, and we talk about a ballet and all that. So those are the things that I was able to tie up in my life, housing, affordable housing, music, education, especially early childhood education. And that's how I think that I sort of impacted the neighborhood, besides the Poets Cafe, which I collaborated a lot with Willie Correa and in other ways.
I can't top that, but I was at that show. I went to see Conjunto Libre at Campos Plaza.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I met Manny Akendo, and he showed me his timbales. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very cool. Very, very cool.
I have to say, Henry Fiol, one of his teachers, is an icon and a legend in Latin music, not only as a singer, but as a painter.
He was my art and music teacher in St. Bridges, which was across the street from Tompkins Square Park. And so I sat across the street from Tompkins Square Park for 8 years of my life and watched just about everything happen there, like naked hippie people walking in. It was a culturally enriching life. I mean, I got to say, there's a lot of benefit to that. But But I grew up on that block, 7th Street, that's where I'm from. I lived on that block for many years as an adult. I got sucked into the whole, drug infestation thing. I was part of that problem, which I overcame. And, but what my first earliest accomplishment, which is probably the most iconic that I have, I could tell stories about, was my friendship and graffiti campaign with Jean-Michel Basquiat. We did the same old graffiti in 1978, which got, some local fame, and then later became a influential graffiti, but not graffiti. It was a different kind of graffiti kind of thing that we did, and it was beneficial to both our careers, I guess. But that's the most well-known thing, although I think, my life has been filled with, wonderful accomplishments and wonderful blessings from life, as well as curses and the rest of that. There's ups and downs. But the Lower East Side once again has been, my base of or was at this. It no longer really is, but it was my base of operations, and I was, involved with the 1980s music scene here. The alternative music, and what else? And the art movement, which has, how arts is all about conserving that generation and that movement, if you will. So that's pretty much.
Anybody remember Woodstock?
Woodstock, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can't top any of these stories. Growing up, I just watched my mom working really hard and my grandmother trying to take care of all of us. And I wasn't exposed to a lot of things art-wise. The goal was to just get me a good job, get me married, and have a stable life. But I think now, as an adult, many things are being exposed to me, and I actually get to use my words and impact people. And it's a little nerve-wracking because you're so vulnerable, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful that even though I didn't get to do that as a child, I get to do that as an adult. And I get to it feels like I'm actually.
Take your time. Okay, everybody cry.
No, it just feels like my life is just changing and I have no control over what's going to happen, but I'm in it to win it, so.
If I can add to that, okay? Any artist, whether they're a poet, a painter, a sculptor, an actor, a creator, always puts themselves in a very vulnerable place because you're there, the spotlight's on you, the whole world looks at you, even if your world is only consisting of 5 people in your circle. You're always putting yourself in a situation where you have to have thick skin for being critiqued, for being questioned about what are your motives and what drives you and what keeps you going. And sometimes you have to ask yourself that question too. Because sometimes I sit in my studio in Brooklyn and I look at 4 walls and I realized at one point, I said this before, I actually have 3 walls. The 3 walls are the walls that I actually paint on, but the 4th wall is the world outside of my studio. So I have to feel good with my work. Even if I hate it sometimes, I have to feel good that I have to let it go so that everyone else can experience it. And just because you see something in blue doesn't mean everyone else will see it in blue. They'll see it in different colors. So your work is always open for interpretation. And that's the beauty about it, that you just never know what it can turn into. and what it can open. I mean, Al was painting before I was, and we sort of became co-conspirators in the same movement that's become and the same with music, right? And so all these influences are that fourth wall. So it's great to be in that spot of being uncomfortable and sometimes being vulnerable. It's fine, because we all are at the end of the day. And that's the, no, I want to cry.
Let me. Hello? Okay. Thank you. So, so you guys have seen the changes that have gone on in our neighborhood. You know, I know for me personally, it's like highs and lows of stuff. Because, you know, when the Lower East Side was burning down, we were trying to save buildings. We did the whole sweat equity thing. Adopt a building. Just trying to get our own people trained into how to reconstruct your tenement building, how to do plumbing, how to do your own electrical and stuff like that, and manage.
Once you do that, manage.
Yeah. So, and it was a real struggle. It was a real struggle. It was a real learning curve for us. And so, I'd like to ask you guys, you know, considering all the stuff that we've been through, where we come from, and the changes that have been taking place over the years, how has that affected you and what you do and your art and your influences out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, I talk about that every day, really, in my art, and I react to it, I respond, I try to educate people with that message, because what happened, you know, it's funny, because when we grew up, I was looking at somebody posted a picture of a lot, and it's got my tag on it, and it's, you know, it's like from 1974 or something, and it's the blown out, burnt out, Hiroshima-looking Lower East Side that we grew up in, that I lived in every day. And what occurred to me, well, it wasn't even about like looking at my graffiti. What I was looking at was like, damn, we got used to this stuff. We were like being like conditioned to be accepting living in squalor, in this mess, and like that's normal. And it's what's totally unacceptable to us. We were being conditioned to accept the unacceptable. So what happens is, first of all, my generation, we grew up expecting less, right? So because it's okay. But what happens is, in comes development, skips over our people who actually struggled and contributed to the culture there, et cetera, were educated, had families, raised children, steamrolls over that and brings in a whole new, or builds for a whole nother class. So we're excluded completely, even though you were basically the pioneers. Imagine all those people that rode to the Wild West, and they just get... And that's probably the most painful thing to witness, because, you know, I mean, I walked down, I lived across from, me and my ex-wife lived across from Katz's Deli. My uncle was a counterman at you know, selling hot dogs there for many years. So I knew that was my neighbor. It's like Pepe was talking, it was our neighborhood. We knew people by name. You walk out the street and everybody, it takes you 20 minutes to get to the corner because you're saying hello to everybody. But what happens is, you go out there now and it looks like Midtown. So there's this hole in your soul. It's like if you grew up there, because it's like, what is this place? Even though you do see remnants of your history, it's just like so splintered. And then it's like they put these, you know, mega structures right in the middle. No finesse, no regard for history, et cetera, et cetera. So it's actually, for me, it's a very passionate thing, and I talk about the stuff, you know, because it was kind of like we got ripped off, you know, as usual. You know, somebody else was just talking about something, which is, it's not for the poor people, and that's, you know, David Gonzalez New York Times made a funny comment. We were talking about these new nicknames that they have for neighborhoods, like NoHo and he said, any place that's in fluxus, where they're like trying to develop, the generic name is No Mo Po.
So, like I said before, I grew up in the Lower East Side my entire life. And just seeing all the changes in the last 20 years or whatever, it really breaks my heart because I feel like, just like what you said, all the new things that are being done does not include us. It does not include my children. It includes everybody else. So in my own neighborhood where I once felt like this was my home, I kind of feel like a stranger. I kind of feel like an outsider. And it's kind of sad. Even, growing up, it wasn't easy growing up in the Lower East Side. There were a lot of stuff happening around in the neighborhoods, but I always felt that there was like a sense of belonging and a sense of community. I always felt like, my brother's friends knew who his little sister was. My neighbors knew who my mom was, and they always looked out for you. If you were in trouble, somebody was going to help you. And now it feels like, in my building, because I lived there so long, I still have people that moved in before, so I love them. I love to be able to go to certain neighbors, people that seen me grow up, that still call me by my nickname. Like, I love that, seeing my kids grow up and giving them really like they're loved. But when you move out of that and you start walking further into the neighborhood, you don't even exist, because nothing there was made for you. And you gotta kind of always try to push your way to be seen or be heard or something to be done for you, and it never is. So in a way, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but even like where I live in Baruch, and when I go to the supermarket, there's a big parking lot there right by the old people's building, and there's, I don't know, 50 kids just hanging out, not really doing nothing. And every time I look at those kids, I say, some of those kids are artists. Some of those kids are singers. Some of those kids have something so special, but nobody is caring about those kids, because everybody wants to build a bigger building. Everybody wants to get rid of us so that they can make room for other people. And nobody cares about those kids, because when they look at those kids, they're saying, oh, these hoodlums. Who cares about those guys? But when I see those kids, I see my kids. I see my brothers, I see my sisters, and I wish that something or someone could reach out to them and show them that there's so much more that they are missing out of, and nobody's going to give it to them. And it's really a shame. And that saddens me. I was lucky enough that I raised my 2 daughters, and I tried to give them the best that I could, and it wasn't easy, but I tried. But I wish that I didn't have to had sacrificed so much of me. I'm not complaining about it. What I'm saying is that sometimes in the situations that we're in, it's like we have to give it all of it. And when you get all of it, there's sometimes not enough, there's nothing for you, because you gave all of it. And it feels like the more it feels like you have to give so much, because so much is being taken away. And I don't think it's fair. And it really makes me sad because I still live here. And honestly, unless things change, I don't see like a future of community and hope, because there's a lot of desperate people, because the people that have want to keep and want to have more and don't want to make a way for anybody else. And I think it's unfair.
I would have to say that there's always a ratio that of young people, young souls, that some make it and many don't. It's always, I guess it's always been like that for many years. I wanted to express something about the Lower East Side in particular, and it has to do with water and bridges. I grew up in the projects on the 15th floor with 360-degree view of 5 major bridges in New York City: the Verrazano, the Brooklyn, the Manhattan, the Williamsburg, and the 59th Street Bridge. In the projects. Imagine that. But the one thing that really saved me as an artist, as a young child, is that I was always able to see the moving waters, the river flowing, and the bridges that brought you somewhere else, outside of the Lower East Side. And to me, those bridges were not too far. It wasn't a bridge too far. It was a bridge that brought me farther. And as a child, I grew up watching my projects deteriorate right before my eyes. I remember the first blackout in 1965. Not the 77 one, the one in 1965. And from that year on, as the Vietnam War was raging, and as inequality issues were really rearing their heads, and racism as we see it today, the same back then, I saw my projects go from really middle class establishment go down the tubes. All nationalities went through the gauntlet of terror and fear. And you might remember this, Pepe, that right in front of the Brooklyn Bridge, underneath the highway, on Sundays, there used to be a huge music festival. I don't know if you do.
It's more toward 10th Street. You're right. It's River Park.
No, that one was also one on 10th Street in the park, in the Jackson Park, as we used to call it. But I know which one you're talking about. But the one on South Street, right by Catherine Street, underneath the FDR Drive, was a huge festival that happened every Sunday. My father was running that whole show. He ran a whole operation. A lot of it underworld, kind of, lots of things moving around. But it was one of the most festive.
Dice.
Everything. I mean, and some of the best dancing, the best food, everything was happening under that highway till 2 in the morning. And as a child, I would go down there so I could see it right in front of, it was right in front of my windows. I could look down and see at least 2,000 people dancing and just toasting it up all night long. And it was very inspirational. It was all salsa. It was all, and people came from the avenue, from all sorts, from Spanish Harlem. It was a huge operation. My father had it on lockdown. And I mean, he shook everybody down for like, you want to operate here? It was one of those deals, but he was a musician as well and very inspirational because he was, I looked up to him, and yeah, I'm a product of his love affair with my mother. He's my biological father. That dirty dog, sucio. But, it was that beauty that, like water, it always finds the cracks. It finds its way downhill to a better place. And I think young people will eventually always find something, whether it's a movement, or whatever, whichever shape and form it finds the children find it. and something comes from it. And that's the beauty about New York. It reinvents itself all the time. It does. It's just like it's a big construction site all the time. And people eventually find movements, whether it's in music or in poetry or in painting. So at least, and I'm one of those finger pointers. I'm like, you're always on your screen. You're always, and nobody talks to each other anymore. But I still have faith that the young will always find a way to create their voice.
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist. I have to be honest with you. I know things are rough, especially the last year and a half has been hell. But before I do my take on that, I want to tell you a little anecdote that it's kind of funny. It's a metaphor. My first apartment was on 3rd Street between C and D, $75 for 2 bedrooms, living room and kitchen. And it was a lot of money, man. It was break. I had to have 3 jobs. So I move in there, and one morning I hear a rooster, but not a regular rooster. This is like a real macho, real heavy guy. Like you can tell this guy was in steroids or something. But I didn't see him. 6 o'clock in the morning, not kicking. I mean, his kicking was more like what I'm doing is an imitation. So that went for 3 or 4 days. So one morning, I'm walking out of my apartment, and I saw this guy. And I said, hey, my name is Pepe Flores. I just moved in here. Oh, Paco. Okay, chévere, Paco. Paco, mira, every morning I hear a rooster singing in here, man, and I'm going like crazy. I just came from Puerto Rico, like maybe I'm daydreaming. I think that I'm in Puerto Rico, but I'm here. And he said, oh, come here. He opens the door of his house. In those apartments, when you walk into the kitchen. And then he opens the bathroom door. He had a rooster over there. Pero no un gallo pendejo, era un gallo de pelea. It was a cockfighting motherfucker. And that guy, he looked better than me. I mean, that guy was, I wouldn't try to have a fight with this rooster. And the metaphor of that is that, we Puerto Ricans, when we came here in our suitcases, our culture, our language, our custom, nuestras costumbres, nuestras fiestas, nuestras celebraciones venían con nosotros. And because of people like Paco, I've been able to have this positive attitude in life. I'm not going to say that there's nothing wrong, things that are wrong, very wrong, but we have to try to keep a positive side of things in life, and like what he said, to have faith in those youngsters, but of course, with our help, okay? Because they need, as adults, with experience, they need us. And your family, your daughters, your nephews, your brothers, whatever, they're going to need you. You are the rock for them to survive this madness. So the thing about the rooster is that if you look at the movie that Fania All Stars made called Our Latin Thing, there is a cockfight. And you know where they filmed that cockfight? On 5th Street between C and D. There was an illegal cockfight ring. And I don't know if you know that movie was filmed, most of it was here. And that movie, that's like, it propelled salsa music into the world, okay? Totally into the world. And most of it was filmed down here. So I'm going to be 70 years old in August. And I have to stay positive. And one of the reasons that helping me to hold to that faith is an organization on 9th Street. And you should write this down. It's called Loisaida Center between C and D, 710. And there's a young blood over there working in there. Tato Laviera was one of the founders of that organization. Tato Laviera was one of the founders of the festival, of the Avenue C Festival that was supposed to be celebrated today, and because of the weather and because of the pandemic, they couldn't do it. Pero hay una gente joven ahí que están haciendo un trabajo increíble. And I'm collaborating with them. Next week, put it in your calendar. Next week, I'm having a celebration from Puerto Rico called Fiesta de Cruz. We're going to have an incredible plena group, half men, half women. You know, I always like to give women, empower them. As a matter of fact, the guy that was in charge of that, of the music part for me in that celebration, he died on me 2 months ago because of the COVID. And you know what? There was this young woman, and I hired her. I said, "You're going to do it." And she told me, "Why are you giving me this responsibility? Because you're a woman, you're a young woman, Puerto Rican young woman, and you need to be empowered. You cannot be afraid. You can do it, and you're going to be in charge of this." So I would like to invite you people to, you know, it's going to be limited. So you got my phone number is going to be there somewhere. You got to make a reservation. But this is an incredible, incredible celebration of faith, of music, of culture, of Puerto Rican culture, something that is being forgotten even in Puerto Rico, but we're keeping it here. And not only that, this celebration of Fiesta de Cruz is legendary in the Lower East Side all the way back from the 50s. Okay, there was people, especially women, are the one that carry this tradition. And it's a very special thing. And you don't have to believe in the cross or whatever. It's just the element of unity and the element of faith that people come in there and say hello to each other and we eat. And I'm going to make a sopón for that day. But if you don't sing, you don't get to eat. Okay? So you have supposed to sing. Thank you.
So we have thank you, Pastor. So we have enough time for a few questions from our audience. Yes.
Sandra, can you read some poems for us?
Yes, why not? Thank you, Bob.
Question? Yeah.
You want me to hold it up for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, single word, like he said, is activism. Activism through your art. Great art always comes out of confrontation, out of difficult places. That's what makes the most incredible, vivid, genuine art. And then the art around that makes art about that. You know, so it's always the nucleus that is the most purest. And like I said before, I think there'll be a lot of culminations, you know, a lot of connections, junction boxes, if you want to call it, where people will find each other. They will ultimately find each other and find a little tidbit of a voice that explodes into something bigger. And it doesn't always have to happen in New York. It can happen in other cities. There's struggles all across the nations and the world. But, you know, I really believe that. I mean, yeah.
Not to cut you off, but this is living proof right here because, you know, we all in different places, you know, but we came together for this. We came together for the neighborhood. We came together because this is our roots, you know, this is where part of our soul, you know, was created and born and nourished and nurtured. So we will always find each other. So we're gonna end this with a poem.
I never imagined God being a woman. In my mind, I think of my mother and all that she did. Mi madre, she has superpowers. She knew when you were up to no good and cried tears when you hurt. Her prayers went directly to heaven. She was relentless. I never imagined God being a woman till I had my own daughters, and I knew in an instant I would die so that they may live. Sometimes find courage when there was none to give, and love endlessly. I never conceptualized God being a woman until I watched my mother make something from nothing. Algo de nada, nunca la mesa vacía, clothes on our backs. I never imagined God being a woman until I bathed my own children, and it was a ritual of cleansing and rebirth, how I can distinguish each cry from another and find them in the dark. My mother, mi madre, mi diosa, how she laid the foundation so that we had a path to follow, how she suffered silently and held us all. I never thought God as a woman till I had to forgive those who hurt me so that I can truly love. I never perceived God being a woman until I saw my mother hold the sins of her sons, merciful and life-giving, encumbered with all the daily burden, and still have the strength to carry yours. Yeah.
Sandra. So, yeah, we're going to stand up for you guys. Anybody want to take pictures of all of us together? This was a good time.
Yo.